The Anarchist Cookbook. If you had a book like a rebellious teenager's diary crossed with a recipe collection for chaos, then that would be the Anarchist Cookbook. It's a legendary and controversial guidebook that teaches you how to stir up trouble in a kitchen called society. William Powell, the author, blended Han Solo's rebellious nature with Gordon Ramsay's kitchen prowess. Instead of whipping up cupcakes, this book gives you recipes on how to make explosive devices, offering step-by-step guides on making bombs, weapons, and other naughty contraptions. It's like that over-enthusiastic science teacher who accidentally burns down the lab during a fun experiment. Powell wrote this during the troublesome 1970s, a time when more people were thinking about rebellion and revolutions as a result of the Cold War. The problem with the Anarchist Cookbook is that it's not just a theoretical text for rebellious teenagers. It has real-world implications, having been linked to various acts of violence and mischief. As such, authorities weren't thrilled about this guide to chaos and other dangerous things. While critics see it as a danger to society, defenders see it as a misunderstood champion of free expression. But you can't call it a literary masterpiece when you see your kid turning a pipe into a bazooka. The Satanic verses. If you see this book in an everything must go backyard sale and buy it, thinking it would help you summon the devil for some infernal deal, you'll be disappointed. It's not a guide for calling up demons, but it's just as controversial within religious circles. The Satanic verses starts with two dudes surviving an airplane explosion and suddenly start sprouting wings and experiencing hallucinations. They became fantasy creatures, with one turning into an angel while the other one a devil, as if they were transported into a fantasy RPG game. Greel, the angel character, relived the life of the Prophet Muhammad, and this is where the controversy starts. The book's reimagining of the Prophet shows how Satan sprinkled a few verses in the Quran here and there, basically turning some parts of Islam's holiest book into the work of the devil. It was seen as blasphemous because it fictionalized Muhammad and introduced new controversial interpretations of Islamic history, turning it into the Voldemort of books. You can't even say its name without raising eyebrows. Because of the controversy surrounding it, libraries have hidden it away as if it were a map that leads to a hidden treasure. In 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran dropped a fatwa, an official Islamic ruling but essentially a death warrant, making the author of this book an outlaw and sending him into hiding from assassins. But it wasn't only because the content was problematic. The ripple effect was the scary part, because it sparked protests, debates, and violent reactions from the Islamic community. Religious leaders thought that he was mocking their sacred figures. Imagine someone at your house party throwing around your grandma's ashes. That's how these religious leaders felt about the Satanic verses. Despite its controversy, the book is still widely talked about in non-religious circles, proving that you can still be the life of the party even if you're a party pooper. Days of Sodom. 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade is so scandalous that it makes 50 Shades of Grey look like a Disney bedtime story. The book isn't just at the top of the list of R-rated stuff, it's off the charts somewhere close to XXX in terms of its obscenity. The book tells the story of a group of rich guys holed up in a castle not for a polite tea party, but to indulge in every depraved fantasy known to humanity, rounding up 9 boys and girls and subjecting them to 120 days of unspeakable acts. You're looking at things so obscene that even Johnny Sins wouldn't dare to read this book. Marquis de Sade, the author, didn't hold back. Every horrible sexual act from sadism to masochism was served in this book like a buffet of taboos with a side of outrage. You can think of it as a circus where morality takes a step back and goes on vacation to give way to insanity, which became the new normal in this story. The book crossed the line and pole vaulted over it, becoming a forbidden novel that could give a nun a heart attack and send her straight to the emergency room. Lady Chatterley's Lover. It's the early 1900s in Old England, and every woman is buttoned up from her ankles to her neck. Seeing a bit of skin is the equivalent of seeing a Playboy magazine back then. But here comes D.H. Lawrence with Lady Chatterley's Lover. This forbidden book comes with its fair share of steamy storylines with a dash of immorality. The story follows Lady Chatterley, stuck in a marriage that would make watching paint dry sound very exciting because she's married to a paralyzed man unable to satisfy her womanly needs and desires. This lady isn't the type to sit around and knit all day. She craves adventure, passion, and a lot of that good old physical attention. But with her husband unable to do anything, she dives headfirst into an affair with the gamekeeper Mellors. Now, this guy is your rugged fellow who tends to the woods and looks like he's on the front cover of a men's health magazine. Nothing says frailties of a woman better than a dude with rock-hard abs. But while you'd think that this steamy love affair in the woods upset people about this book, you're only looking at half of this story. Lawrence wrote the book to poke fun at England's rigid class structure and societal norms at a time when there were hardly any differences between a high-class Englishwoman and a nun. It insulted the foundations of England's high society, openly talking about sex and scandalous relationships while showing the differences between people from different classes. The 48 Laws of Power. When you combine books written by your manipulative ex and a master of social strategy, you get The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, which may look like a self-help book for climbing the corporate ladder of success, but is dark enough that it's been banned in a lot of different prison systems worldwide. The scoop is that the book introduces different ways for you to use strategies and tactics for success, but these tips aren't your simple wake up early. Go to the gym, journal your goals advice you get from the usual TED Talks. Instead, they tell you how to manipulate people, places, and situations to get what you want. For example, one of the laws tells you to conceal your intentions. That's the perfect guide for being the sneakiest person at work. Another law tells you to let someone else do the work for you. It basically tells you to manipulate someone to make life easier. These tactics work wonders in a ruthless game of corporate thrones where you kill or get killed in the corporate ladder system. But in regular life, it's like you're bringing a bazooka to a snowball fight because it's ultimately overkill for you to be manipulating people in regular day-to-day interactions. Schools and prisons have banned the 48 Laws of Power out of fear of turning the lunchroom into a scene from Game of Thrones minus the backstabbing and the dragons. Prisons already have a lot of problems to deal with, from drug lords to murderers. The last thing they need is to turn their inmates into masters of manipulative strategies. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Vladimir Nabokov is that one friend who can't keep his fantasies to himself, often telling you about the wet dream he had last night and how he's dying to experience some sick pleasures. Naturally, you want to keep your ears covered the entire time, but he tells such a good story that you can't help but listen to him. That's what you get from Nabokov's book, Lolita. The book drops readers into the mind of a character named Humbert, a seriously twisted guy obsessed with a 12-year-old girl named Dolores Hayes, a.k.a. Lolita. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, because you know that Humbert's moral compass is bound to crash and burn. Imagine telling your family that you're reading a book about a guy who sees a child as a seductive nymph he can't resist. It may be a literary masterpiece in terms of its writing and narrative, but you can't accept the twisted ideas surrounding a story about a grown man in love with a girl barely in her teens. But Nabokov's writing isn't just awkwardly flirting with pedophilia, it's also about how he is like a tragic clown who keeps tripping over his own bad decisions. You find yourself oddly rooting for this bumbling mess throughout that time. You get a sneak preview into the darkest corners of his mind as he's trying to justify his obsession. The writer's genius lies in how he makes you squirm with discomfort while you marvel at his literary gifts. It makes you admire something you shouldn't be admiring, and that can be dangerous to a society that wants its kids to be kids instead of sex symbols. It's like you're introducing porn to a monk, potentially affecting his moral compass forever. Brave New World. Let's say you live in a world where everyone is happy, a little too happy. That's what you get in a book where everyone is forced to stay in line with little to no hope of getting out of that bubble. Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, describes a society where people in this new world were forced to get hooked on a literal happy pill called soma, which made them happy, suppressing deep emotions. It's also a world where society has an entire assembly line churning babies out like designer shoes. You get assigned to a caste like it's a Hogwarts sorting hat ceremony. The government even controls your love life. It's like they control your Tinder account, swiping left until they see a person who would match you, forcing you to marry them. Put yourself in a world where society runs on consumerism, instant gratification, and tech control. Sound familiar? It's like our lives, but with extra drama. We've got smartphones and social media keeping us perpetually distracted, just like the novel's characters. Algorithms tell us what to think and feel, kind of like the government's puppet show in the book. It's like living in a dystopian sitcom where the punchline is our own life. Governments worldwide looked at this book and said, this Huxley guy might be onto something. Let's not give anyone any ideas. It's like they're worried we might trade freedom for the convenience that people get in Brave New World. Naturally, it found its place in the forbidden library of taboo books. But from how things are going, Brave New World seems more of a cautionary tale that's already predicted the future for us. Who knows what Elon's Neuralink will do to our brains one day? Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm, puts you in Old MacDonald had a farm nursery rhyme that gets darker. The animals on this farm had enough of humans bossing them around, eventually kicking them out and starting to run things themselves. No humans, no problems, right? That sounds like a great place for Porky and his pals to live in. But Orwell's book swiped at society through his fluffy tale of barnyard politics. The story revolves around how the pigs at the farm eventually took power, becoming the new head hogs. So, from telling the chickens and everyone else that all animals are equal, these oinkers thought that they were better than everyone else, taking the place of the humans as the new oppressors. They turned the farm into a pig pen of oppression and inequality. In other words, Orwell was telling a story about how revolutions that try to give power back to the people will only lead to new dictators rising. The book is a satire that pokes fun at power-hungry leaders who promise equality but decide that they deserve more than everyone else. Governments who saw what Orwell was trying to do felt that Animal Farm was not just airing their dirty laundry, but also throwing it out for everyone, fearing it might inspire people to start looking at their leaders as less noble steeds and more like pigs. If you think that you have barnyard animals or pets seemingly plotting your downfall, you might want to share your thoughts with us by joining our Discord. The Grapes of Wrath. You'd think a book about grapes is as wholesome as biting into a batch of sweet fruit. However, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck makes you think that you're eating sour grapes that could turn your face upside down instantly. First, the book gives the Joad family's woes the spotlight in the most unflattering way possible. Set during the Great Depression, it's like Steinbeck decided to cast farmers as the villains of the agricultural world, complete with sinister mustaches and brooding glares. Instead of being your friendly neighborhood food producers, he turned them from farm heroes into sourpusses, making it seem like they harvested frowns instead of potatoes. The language and themes in the book were also as juicy as overripe grapes. There were plenty of scenes of violence, harsh realities, and profanity that were too sensitive for the mind of the regular 1940s American conservative readers. They would have wanted to go to church to confess that they read The Grapes of Wrath. As such, authorities feared that the book might corrupt the minds of the innocent and the youth, turning their brains into a chaotic fruit salad of rebellious thoughts. Then there was the belief that the book seemed un-American. It criticized capitalism, looking like it was a bit too red for comfort during a time when Americans feared the spread of communism. Slaughterhouse-Five. The first thing you'd usually hear from people who've heard about Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five is that it's that book about time traveling and aliens. But there's a deeper reason why this novel found itself in the dimension of banned books. It's basically about a soldier who got so lost in time that he traveled from one era to another, playing hopscotch through history. But with explosions at one point, he's a POW dressed in Germany during its infamous bombing, and the book paints it under the worst lighting possible. Written during the Cold War, when the government tried to convince everyone that fighting communists was as American as apple pie, this book was like the literary equivalent of someone wearing a Make Love Not War t-shirt to a military parade. The feds probably thought it was a sneaky hippie manifesto secretly encouraging people to swap their rifles for daisies. Some readers found the book unbearable because Vonnegut boldly mixed existential dread with dark humor. People were not ready for that brand of comedy, especially when things became a bit too real for readers. So, the book's banishment is mostly due to its audacious blend of satire, science fiction, and uncomfortable truths. In the grand theater of literature, it's the play that makes people question what they saw and rethink their beliefs. And during the 70s, it just wasn't what the government wanted people to feel. Invisible Man, written by Ralph Ellison. During the 1950s, the book was so loud that it was like bringing a karaoke machine to a mind party. It loved diving deep into racial identity and societal invisibility while airing dirty secrets and subjects that were once considered taboo. The book's exploration of race and identity stirred the pot during an era when black people were still second-class citizens. No one wanted to read a book with a surprise lecture about politics if they expected a party, and that was what Invisible Man was all about. It's like you realized your favorite TV show is actually a documentary on a boring topic like industrial waste. Then there's the language and themes that were a bit too much for the 1950s mind. The book tackles violence, exploitation, and discrimination, which used to be as awkward as talking about your non-existent girlfriend in the middle of a family dinner. It was a little too raw and honest, making everyone question everything they knew about society. The vulgar nature of the novel forced schools to expel it from their library quickly, turning Invisible Man into an invisible book.